Good evening, everyone. How's it going? Got a little bit of Seahawks news. I usually don't upload this late in the day, but we learned something a couple hours ago, and I wanted to go over it a little bit. Well, I don't know how much we really learned because what we're going to talk about in this video, if you watched the Seahawks last year in any real capacity, you probably noticed something. You probably noticed something with regards to DK Metcalf. So, through a lot of the 2021 season, a lot of people, myself included, noticed that DK Metcalf did not look like himself sometimes. Seemed like he was laboring a little bit, seemed like he was playing a few fewer snaps than I would have expected. It just seemed like things weren't quite right with him. So, we learned what more or less what the nature of DK Metcalf's injury was. So, Bob Condotta kind of lays it out here. Metcalf suffered a foot injury in practice prior to Week 4 game against the 49ers and practiced sparingly the rest of the season. So Metcalf basically played through a foot injury the whole year, which we kind of already knew. So that's not really what's interesting here. The interesting thing is that we have now received confirmation that Metcalf's foot injury was enough for him to go get surgery. And earlier on Instagram today, he posted this picture of him in a boot, and that more or less confirms that he had some sort of procedure to take care of the foot injury. So we now have a pretty good idea that Metcalf was playing through something of at least moderate significance in 2021. So I don't think this is necessarily shocking to people. There were some games where Metcalf he looked a little gassed. He looked like he was struggling a little bit. But I think the thing that we should really be taking away from learning that he has now had to go under the knife, because there isn't a whole lot to say about the surgery itself. I don't think it's going to be anything that interferes with his ability to get on the field in training camp in several months. He should be completely cleared and completely 100% good to go by the time we're hitting the field at the VMAC. So that's not really what this is about. I don't know why he wouldn't have had the surgery right after the season ended. I don't know why it's mid-February and we're doing this, but that doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, should be good to go by the time training camp starts. But I think this should just be a keen reminder of how good DK Metcalf is, and to some of the people out there who were looking at some of his performances in 2021 and thinking maybe this guy isn't all he's cracked up to be, just understand what he was dealing with in 2021 and understand how potentially great he can be. So this guy was playing through a foot injury for 14 games. 14 games he played through a foot injury, did not get to practice through most of the year, was playing with a backup quarterback for 3.5 games, was playing with a starting quarterback with a busted finger, was playing in a new offense, and he still almost had 1,000 yards. And there were some people out there who were like, "Oh man, DK, he's not even getting to 1,000 yards." Like, don't worry about that stuff. Honestly, I think that in some areas Metcalf improved as a receiver a little bit from year 2 to year 3 in just his ability to run a route tree and his ability to run slightly different kinds of routes. He'll never be a Cooper Kupp in that regard. He'll never be able to run the whole route tree. But I do think he's making strides in those areas. The problems with Metcalf in 2021 were not related to his limitations as a player. His limitations as a player are known. He doesn't have the greatest hands in the world, and he doesn't have the most complex route tree in the world. He's not perfect. He's not made in a lab. He's not like Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson looked like he was made in a lab to be the perfect receiver. Metcalf's not that. However, I just want people to understand that Metcalf not getting to 1,000 yards last year and having a couple of no-show games, I don't think that's a reflection of him being overrated or not the guy that you think. And I don't think it's any reason for us to be wary about re-signing him or needing to trade him. There have been definitely some people this offseason and during the last season that were talking about the possibility of trading Metcalf and cashing out on that before maybe he got exposed or he turned into a personality problem. But I'm not really seeing it that way. I'm seeing a guy who does have a lot of drive and motivation to be the best player that he can be. I saw a guy who got frustrated at points sometimes last year, and occasionally he acted a little out of line, but I didn't think he ever did anything that bad. Honestly, whenever he kind of gets out of control on the field, most of the time he lures another player into committing a penalty and doesn't commit one himself. So I can't even really get mad at him for that. And there were a lot of frustrating things about last season, especially for a guy who was playing for his next contract. I can kind of understand that. But what he did last year, he did while playing through an injury. And when you look at the way he goes about his business during the season, in the off season, I see a guy here who has full motivation to be the best player that he can be. He played through a significant foot injury for 14 games in 2021, knowing that if things got worse, maybe his future contract's in jeopardy. But he toughed it out. So just understand that, well, first of all, you got to understand we're not trading Metcalf as long as Carroll's here, I'm pretty sure, because Carroll loves Metcalf. I think you guys remember how Carroll reacted when we drafted him. That guy's not going anywhere. But before you write Metcalf off as overrated because he didn't have his greatest season in 2021, just understand things like this. Things like this on the screen here. He's working through some stuff. It was a messy season for a lot of players. I think Metcalf was as frustrated as anybody. But for him to overcome all that and still almost get to 100 yards, I really am not... I'm not saying too much negative about it. I think we got a special one here. I want to see where his career goes. I want to see how he develops. I want to see what he can do in this system. So, yeah. So the news here is that Metcalf did indeed have foot surgery. But I think the lesson we need to take away from this is understand that he's a supremely talented player. And the reasons why the performance was not always there in 2021 have a lot more to do with the circumstances that are out of Metcalf's control. The things that are actually in his control, or at the very least, are related to him. Like, he doesn't have great hands, okay? But it's not like he led the league in drops last year. Honestly, I watched every Seahawks snap last year, and I saw maybe 5 or 6 drops all year from Metcalf. So it's not as big a deal as people make it out to be. Yes, he's not Jamar Chase. He doesn't have Jamar Chase hands, but I don't think his hands are atrocious. Maybe they're not even bad. Maybe they're average. Yes, his route tree is not the most varied route tree in the world, but the ones he can run, the ones he does run, he's destructive. So let me know what you guys think down below, but that's the latest from Corbin Smith and Bob Condotta, and, of course, DK Metcalf on Instagram himself. So, good to have the procedure out of the way. Hopefully, there's no lingering effects when the season starts and he can go out in year number 4. Maybe we'll even save a little bit of money on that extension after he had a little bit of an off 2021, and he can go back to being the future greatest Seahawks receiver of all time. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. See you guys in stream soon.